Hello and welcome back to the Opera Box. Today we're going to be discussing a topic that comes up every once in a while in opera. And of course we're going to touch on the legend of the feared illusionisti, those people, those die-hard opera fanatics that exist in almost every opera house that can make or break a performer and make or break the opera house. So why do opera audiences boo? The opera world was riveted back in December 2006, not on a grand opera, but on a soap opera. It was the saga of tenor Roberto Alagna, who was loudly booed at a performance at the venerable La Scala Opera House in Milan after he sang the opening tenor aria Celeste Aida. It was not the booing itself that caused the storm, but the fact that Alagna left the stage, refusing to return in the middle of a performance. An understudy by the name of Antonello Palumbi replaced him, and he had absolutely no time to even take off his jeans and put on a costume. Palumbi was roundly cheered at the end of the opera, more for his heroism than for his voice. La Scala subsequently canceled the rest of Alagna's Aida appearances and cast doubt upon his future appearances with the house, while he in turn said he would sue La Scala for the money due to him for the entire run. Alagna's version of the event was quite imaginative. He said that he had been insulted even before the performance began when three ominous backstage figures made karate chop motions at him as he prepared to go on stage. He also claimed that the booing even started before he even began to sing, which caused him to develop both high blood pressure and low blood sugar, both of which were responsible for the strain in his voice. In truth, none of the players at La Scala that night acted nobly. The house probably invited trouble by offering Alagna the leading male role of Radames, since his voice lacks the heroic heft that audiences demand for that role. But one can hardly blame the management for reacting strongly to Alagna's graceless exit, which is almost unheard of in the opera world. The 43-year-old tenor is hardly noted for his exemplary behavior. Alagna and his wife, soprano Angela Gheorghiu, are famous for their tantrums, demands, and walk-off stage, their fits over wigs and rehearsal schedules, as just as much for their often fine performances. In the business, they are known as Dracula and Draculetta, or Bonnie and Clyde, among other unflattering names. In this case, Alagna outdid himself in tastelessness. After he exited the stage, shaking his fist at the audience, or, as some people have reported, giving a military salute, he went out into the cold, where he snapped some photos on his cell phone and gave onlookers an a cappella performance of Puccini's Addio Fiorito Assi, Pinkerton's farewell to Japan in Puccini's Madama Butterfly. Perhaps it was a melodramatic farewell to La Scala. The concept of expressing disapproval at a performance dates back to the early Greeks. Booing has been associated mostly with Italian opera houses, where not only singers but composers as well have received the same treatment. Rossini's great opera, The Barber of Seville, was not only booed at its performance, but a cat ran across the stage during the performance, and so was Verdi's La Traviata. La Scala audiences have booed the best of them. Renata Tebaldi was booed because she wasn't Maria Callas. Callas was booed because she wasn't Renata Tebaldi. Mirella Freni was booed by Renata Scotto fans. Renee Fleming was booed at La Scala because the audience didn't like her interpolated runs in Donizetti's Lucrezia Borgia, after which the conductor Gianluigi Gelmetti became so upset that he collapsed not once but twice on stage and had to be carted off by an ambulance. At the San Carlo Opera House in Naples, which is known as the toughest opera house of all, even the native-born Enrico Caruso was booed. American opera audiences can be difficult too. Some years ago, I heard vociferous booing at the Met when director Robert Wilson appeared on stage for a stage call at the end of a very stylized production of Lohengrin. Last December, audiences at the same house booed Placido Domingo, not as a singer, but as a conductor. In this case, Domingo was criticized for maintaining his own metronome-like pace in conflict with what one audience member called soprano Anya Netrebko's artistic vision. At La Scala, the unattractive habit can be attributed mainly to the logionisti, those people sitting in the highest and least expensive seats who feel they have the right to make negative opinions known. Their rationale is that people wealthy enough to buy good tickets don't know or care about the opera. They come merely to be seen, whereas the logionisti arrive with encyclopedic knowledge and often entire scores of the opera. When La Scala was renovated some years ago, an attempt was made to silence them by eliminating standing room seats. The effort, not surprisingly, failed. Booing is only one weapon in the logionisti arsenal. Words like cretino, which needs no translation, are heard at times, and bouquets are thrown, not of flowers, but of radishes in the case of Callas, and turnips in the case of Renata Scotto. Sometimes the logionisti don't get away with their actions. Both tenor Salvatore Lecitra and conductor Riccardo Muti were booed at La Scala in 2000 when Lecitra failed to interpolate the traditional high C in Di Quella Pira from Verdi's Il Trovatore. Muti, who usually opposes any note that's not original to the score, turned around and informed the logionisti that an opera house is not a circus. Earlier, the tenor Franco Corelli was so angered by a heckler in Naples that he ran off stage in full costume and burst into the box where the culprit sat. On the other hand, Luciano Pavarotti, after a poorly received 1992 performance, gracefully apologized and said the audience had the right to criticize him. Opera managements differ in their responses to audience heckling. At the Met in 2003, the Joseph Volpi era, a man who booed Canadian soprano Alexandra de Shortes was thrown out at intermission by security guards. Peter Gelb, who now heads the company, might well react differently. After the Alanya incident, Gelb was reported as saying that an audience has a right to boo. He did, however, draw the line at throwing tomatoes. Clearly, Gelb feels, as others do who favor this practice, that an informed audience response, whether it's negative or positive, keeps management on its toes and results in higher performance standards. So interestingly, opera is the single art form that receives this treatment regularly. How many times have you heard booing when a pianist flubs a note or two, or a violinist's intonation is poor, or when a ballerina trips? Not heard, I suspect, since the 1913 world premiere of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, whose music did cause an actual riot. Even atonal contemporary music is generally spared vocal disapproval. Instead, audience members nod off, will rustle their programs, or look at their watches. Opera lovers are a breed in themselves. Many of them know and care little about other forms of classical music, and they're more overtly passionate than other music lovers. If an opera doesn't sound as it should to their ears, they take it personally. In short, they're typically like the opera themselves. They lack subtlety and they're prone to giving vent to their feelings. The real issue is that booers gain by their action. For the singer on stage, even if he or she sticks it out stoically for the rest of the opera, it's almost impossible to recover fully from such an insult. Anyone who knows Aida recognizes that for a tenor to come on stage in Act 1 and immediately launch into a difficult aria with its high B-flat ending is a real challenge. Reviews that appeared the preceding week after the opening night of Aida referred to Alagna's nervousness during that first aria and his significant improvement later. The voice, after all, is unlike other instruments. A violin doesn't get a stomach ache or a nasal drip. It doesn't arrive at a hall sleepless and headachy after a 6-hour delayed plane flight. It doesn't pick up a flu from the concierge. When an oboe reed is shot, the player pulls another one out of the case. But for the singer, the instrument is the body. You don't carry a spare of vocal cords. Any tiny thing can have a negative impact on it, which is why singers tend to be so obsessive about their daily living. When their bodies fail them and they're unable to sing well, singers face another problem. To cancel a performance often spells trouble, because audiences tend to speculate that the singer wasn't really ill but found something completely better to do. Consequently, some singers go on when they shouldn't, like Maria Callas, who completed one act of Norma with a high fever against her better judgment. Naturally, she was booed when her withdrawal was announced after the first act. People didn't believe she was sick because her voice didn't sound bad. So what is the antidote? The conductor Giuseppe Patin may have found the solution in 1982 when the Met audience booed tenor Carlo Bini, who had replaced Domingo. Writing of that performance in a recent New York Times letter, a player with the Met Orchestra reported that the conductor was so angry that he stopped conducting. "Shame on you! Have at least some respect for Ponchielli," he shouted. "If you don't like it, don't applaud." And it worked. The audience sat in stunned silence for the rest of the opera. To Bini's great credit, he sang through not only the opera, but the entire run. Patin was right. Any singer facing a smattering of weak applause or a house that empties out after an act knows something is wrong. The audience's disappointment registers clearly, but without an interruption of the performance or the shattering of fragile egos. I can't leave the subject of booing without mentioning one kind of booing that is not acceptable but downright fun. That is when the character, rather than the singer who portrays him or her, is booed. Adults almost never do that, but kids do. When a few years ago, the Opera Company of Philadelphia hosted high school students at a dress rehearsal of Puccini's Tosca, I heard the students let out a prolonged boo as the singer portraying the evil Scarpia came out to take his solo bow. It was the best compliment they could have given him. So thank you for joining me again for this segment of the Opera Box. Let me know your thoughts and comments. Email me and I will address them on another segment of the Opera Box. So take care and we'll see you soon.